You have probably one of the more interesting backgrounds in Bitcoin of anybody that I've met
Thank you.
to date. Um, Winamp and Apple and Beats and LVMH. Like, what brought you, to Ledger? Like, give us a little bit of the prehistory.
Yeah. So, I mean, so just to give you a background on me, I grew up in Indiana, and I started collecting records at age 5, and I started programming computers at age 8. And
Cool.
then high school was punk rock and skateboarding. And then I went to Indiana University and studied computer science, long story short. But while I was there, I started working on digital music. And that, I built I built the second ever music related website for the Indiana University Music Library. That sounds amazing, but there were like 12 people online then. Like, it didn't matter. It didn't mean anything.
Makes it cooler.
But we were just, I mean, it's funny because, the Beastie Boys manager sent me yesterday, he texted me, he found the letter that I wrote to him. It's weird. It's like a typed letter too. I really wasn't sure. I was like, how did I make this letter? It looks like it was on a typewriter, but I'm sure it wasn't. It was my pitch for the second Beastie Boys tour I went on in 1998. And in that I included a computer for encoding audio. It was like more than $4,000. And what I remember is I was encoding audio at a command line, like C:\\/ encoding MP3s. So I dropped out of grad school in 1995 to go on tour with the Beastie Boys and came to LA and started working in the internet. Again, long story short, it was just early days. Like the first time a movie company paid for a website, it was MGM paying us to make the website for Showgirls in 1995. The amazing Pearl Verhoeven,
Yep.
NC-17, blockbuster. And by the way, of course, the website was basically softcore porn, and it was running on the SGI Indigo slab on my desk. Like, that was on a dual ISDN. I quickly had to throw it in my Mitsubishi and drive it to Marina Del Rey and put it on an actual T1 line, of which there were only 2 in Los Angeles. But like, those were the early days. This is why my point, like, these early days are fun. So late 90s, I joined a very small little company called Nullsoft that made Winamp, and that sold to AOL in May of 99. Made Nutella, which was the first like true P2P file sharing, like BearShare, LimeWire, Kazaa. They all ran on the Nutella protocol that was made by Justin Frankel, who lives here in New York City. And then
I think I fucked up at least 3 or 4 family computers with Kazaa and LimeWire.
there you go, man.
Yeah.
Those were crazy days because and there's a lot of pattern matching there for me, and it really impacted like my view when I first saw Bitcoin. Because when I first saw Bitcoin, let me get to that in a second. So then I had another company that I sold to Yahoo in December of 2003. Built Yahoo's music subscription service, 1 million songs in your pocket.
Nice.
It was like this. The problem though was that there was Apple, and then there was everyone else. So Apple had iPod, iTunes, and then there were a bunch of us that were in like the Windows Media ecosystem, and it was Yahoo and Virgin, and it was super fun, but also early. It was pre-iPhone, pre-Spotify, but we're like chunking away at it. And at Yahoo Music, people forget, but we had #1 music video service before YouTube. We had the #1 radio service before Pandora. Like it was a #1 music website on the internet. So I ran Yahoo Music until about 2008. Built a company then with Peter Gocher, who started DigiDesign and made Pro Tools. And then in 2013 joined Jimmy Iovine and Dr. Dre, Luke Wood, Trent Reznor, and building Beats Music. So we built Beats Music. Super fun. Trent Reznor as the creative director. He's a genius. He's a true Renaissance man. And then sold that to Apple. Built Apple Music, including the radio there with Zane Lowe, which was one of the more fun things I got to do in my career. And then I got a call to come to Paris and work for this luxury conglomerate that I'd never heard of called LVMH. I'd heard of the brands, of course, but I was like a music guy. I didn't know that like one family owned, both Celine and Sephora. But I'm a quick study, and I thought that LVMH was super interesting because, well, for me personally, I get to get out of the California bubble. I get to see if all of these things I've learned about music apply in culture broadly. And turns out they do, which is really, really interesting. But also really specifically, like the things I'd learned about the internet were that the internet moves culture from mass media to niche. And also it moves us from a world where marketing is hyper efficient because of mass media to a world where quality is hyper efficient. So when I looked at LVMH, I saw like a massive, very valuable niches that are really genuinely focused on quality. And I thought, well, that business actually really works on the internet, and they haven't exploited that, or it's not even exploit's not the right word. It's just like meeting your customers where they are.
Sure.
You know, your customers live here and you're on Madison Avenue. Like, how do you meet them on the internet instead? So I did that, and it was really fun. But right when I moved to Paris, I met Pascal Gauthier, who had been the first, remember, Ledger started in 2014 and I moved to Paris in 2015. So when I met Pascal in 2015, it was like an investment I just made. And, you know, I had to kind of get my head around it. Like, well, why won't we just do this with our phones, you know, et cetera. So then now to my Bitcoin history, and then I'll come back to Ledger. I had first seen Bitcoin 2009, 2010. This guy, Parker, in my office had like told me I had to look at it. And when I looked at it through the Nutella lens, right? The Napster lens.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, you can't outlaw the protocol. Like, it's just code. I knew that. Nutella was just code. It was open source code, and you can't get rid of Nutella. It's just code. But you can shut down all the companies that use the code. Kazaa, BearShare, LimeWire. You can make sure that nobody builds a business on copyright infringement. Mm-hmm. So I looked at Bitcoin pretty hard. Like, I don't know when it was, if it was 2009 or 2010, but somewhere in there, and was like, well, this threatens state sovereignty. This will not live. They will not allow this to live. If they shut down Napster and, you know, all these other file sharing protocols, and now we have, you know, Spotify, then they're going to shut down this sort of permissionless money thing and build permissioned digital money.
Yeah.
Right. So then it was more for me later, you know, more around 2015, when I went, okay, we've got critical mass. Like, Bitcoin has gotten big enough that game theory is here.
Yeah.
You know, and I thought this back then. I was like, this is just too big now, because if you shut it down there, it's going to be welcomed over here. And that was exactly my kind of math and being interested in it. And then through my friendship with Pascal, I got to know Ledger as a company. And then also the other friend that I met, or that I made when I first moved to Paris, is Tony Fadell. And Tony invented the iPod. He co-invented the iPhone. He started the company Nest. And what happened was he and his family and my family were like pod families during COVID. And we just wound ourselves up about crypto. We're like, you've got $2 trillion in stimulus in the US, $1 trillion in Europe. The technology is here. You know, you've got smart contract technology. So this gets into way more than just digital gold, right? This starts to get into all kinds of layers of, you know, of not only finance, but also identity.
Yeah.
You know, so many other things.
It's a mind virus.
Yeah. And so, you know, that was, you know, and that was kind of the way in. Now, the other thing that happened to me in the interim, which is pertinent to Ledger, is with everything that happened in crypto in the 2017 cycle, with ICO boom and bust, that gave me a lot of, I called Pascal in 2018 and I said, your Ledger thing is going to be huge. And he was like, okay, well, why do you finally get it? And I said, because you're like Cisco in the late 90s. What I remember is in the late 90s, you had, Microsoft killing Netscape, AOL buying Netscape, and
Cisco the rapper, not Cisco the rapper, the thong song.
Not Cisco,
okay,
not
that's
the song.
What I thought. Was curious how you read that back.
And no longer Cisco, not Cisco the Kid either.
Yeah, okay.
Which I watched on Sundays when growing up. But no, not that dong, which is a real jam, by the way. But no, Cisco, the guys who make routers and networking, because you had this World War 3.0 thing going on, right? Is it going to be Yahoo, Lycos, or Excite as the winner, right? Or Alta Vista, or is this new Google thing going to be the thing? And you had Cisco just sitting on the sidelines going, we're good.
Yeah.
Is there going to be more internet tomorrow or less internet? Probably more. I think we're good. Because, when with the ICO boom, you're like, what is going on? It's like creating 10,000 religions to compete with Bitcoin as a religion, right? Like that's what it felt like. And then Ledger is just sitting there going, will there be more digital ownership tomorrow or less digital ownership tomorrow? Probably more.
Yeah.
And if you have digital private property, do you need security? Yeah, you do. And that was the click for me in 2018, that you, regardless of religion, you will have digital ownership, you will have digital private property. And if you have digital private property that you could lose, you must have security. Might be on the custodian side, might be on the user side, doesn't matter. in a way, right? You for a company to be focused on security and custody of digital assets, it's like Cisco being involved in like digital networking, right? And so that was the realization for me. So in summer of 2020, after I'd been at LVMH for 5 years, is when I said to Pascal, I was like, okay, I want to help with this if I can. We'd been talking about it for a couple of years, but I had another job. It was just like me talking to my friend about, what are you doing and how can I help? And then it was like, I want in. And then Tony joined as well to help us, actually design hardware. He took, it was funny because Tony really, long story short, sort of approved me going to Ledger. He wanted to go in and see if the tech was real. He didn't want his friend going to, a company that, Tony invests in deep tech, right? So, but he came back from talking to Charles and the technology team at Ledger and said, yo, these guys are the real deal. But then right away when I joined the company, he met with Pascal and I and said, this product you guys make is not going to work, right? Like he's like, you guys are this, and he meant specifically Ledger Nano, right? Which looks like a USB stick, if you're polite. It is like
the one with the buttons on top.
Yep.
Because the first one was really just a USB stick.
Well, yeah, the very first one was kind of even just a card.
Yeah.
Yeah. And but the nanos are, the two buttons, you click OK with your thumbs.
Yeah. And
they are beloved. It's also, I always kind of say it's like the Air Jordan of crypto. Like if you're going to make a piece of art and include crypto in your piece of art, you're going to put a Ledger Nano in it. So the form factor is beloved, but Tony's point was it's also comes back to our earlier conversation. It's B2G, business to geek. It's not B2C, business to consumer.
Yep.
And so Tony said, how do we get this thing to be business to consumer?